Did the stars decide Waterloo? On June 18, 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte lost everything in a single afternoon. The man who had reshaped Europe, the architect of a new civil code, the commander who stood beside Alexander in reputation, collapsed on the fields of Waterloo. Empires do not fall easily. So what happened? Was Napoleon defeated by men? Or was he defeated by the hour in which he fought? As French and Allied forces maneuvered across the muddy ground, locked in brutal equilibrium, something else stood in perfect opposition above them. The heavens themselves were checked and counterchecked. If astronomical knowledge is attainable at all, it does not concern personal romance, daily fortune, or the small anxieties of individual life. It concerns the great turning points of history. Astrology, if it has any truth in it, does not belong to individuals. It belongs to time itself. The illusion of personal astrology. When I sit on a bench in the park and watch people pass by, I am struck by how completely different each one is. Not merely in race or nationality, but in instinct, temperament, thought, and biological inheritance. Every individual is the living product of thousands of ancestors. Within each person resides an immeasurable genetic history. If astrology were to determine the life of a single human being, it would need to account for the planetary influences affecting not only that person, but their parents, grandparents, and forebears stretching back centuries. The complexity would be incalculable. Our genetic inheritance is one of the most powerful determinants in our lives. Compared to that vast ancestral background, the incidental position of the planets at the moment of birth must be admitted to be minuscule. For this reason, genethliological, personal astrology cannot possibly fathom the complexity of the individual. We are free in ways a horoscope cannot predict. But that does not mean astronomical knowledge is meaningless. It means we have been looking in the wrong place. The true domain of astrology. If astrology does not govern individuals, perhaps it governs something larger. The ancient cosmologers never intended their science to become a fortune-teller's trade. They were attendants of kings. In earlier civilizations, the ruler did not merely administer the state, he embodied it. This may be the deeper meaning behind the doctrine of the divine right of kings. They were not divine, but their personal fate became inseparable from the destiny of the nation. When the state becomes personified in one individual, the horoscope of that individual symbolically reflects the nation itself. History does not turn upon the unnoticed millions. It turns upon rare personalities whose lives become entangled with the movement of an entire age. Such individuals do not move freely. They are carried by the current of time. When astrology lost the sky. So why does astrology appear so discredited today? Not because the heavens stopped moving, but because astrologers stopped following them. The Earth slowly wobbles on its axis in a vast 26,000-year cycle known as the precession of the equinoxes. Over centuries, the position of the vernal equinox shifts gradually through the zodiac. When Claudius Ptolemy wrote his Tetrabiblos, he stated, "For this reason, although there is no natural beginning of the zodiac, since it is a circle, they say that the sign which begins with the vernal equinox, that of Aries, is the starting point of them all." Yet, even in his lifetime, the vernal equinox had begun its movement from Aries into Pisces. Astrologers did not know how to repredicate the signs as this movement continued, so they froze the zodiac in place. The sky advanced, the calculations did not. If Saturn stood visibly in Taurus, the ephemerides might insist it belonged to Gemini. It is no wonder astrology fell into ridicule, not because the cosmos failed, but because its interpreters refused to follow it. Waterloo, a sky in stalemate. Let us return to Waterloo. Napoleon had unified Europe for the first time since Charlemagne. His civil code survives today. His battlefield genius seemed untouchable. How could anyone defeat such a man? Goethe would later imply that he defeated himself. One of the best accounts of the battle appears in Stefan Zweig's Sternstunden der Menschheit. He describes the decisive contrast between commanders. Napoleon's General Grouchy was trained in rigid obedience. It is recorded that when an officer once disobeyed Napoleon by reaching a book from a high shelf, Napoleon replied, "General, you are a full head taller than I am. Should you disobey me again on the battlefield, I will see that the difference in our height is instantly remedied." On the opposing side stood General Blücher, formed in the tradition of Frederick the Great. The Prussian military philosophy emphasized initiative and accountability. As Clausewitz would later write in Vom Kriege, when armies of equal strength meet, they may do nothing more than destroy one another without decisive result. Wellington himself lamented, "I wish it were nightfall, or that the Prussians might come." The battlefield was locked, and so, symbolically, was the sky. The sun and moon, the marshals of the heavens, stood restrained. Mars and Saturn held them in check. Opposition mirrored opposition. The heavens and the battlefield were interlocked in stalemate. But one planet stood alone, unafflicted, independent, unbound: Mercury. Below, Blücher heard cannon fire and moved toward it without hesitation. A small, independent movement broke the equilibrium. Grouchy did not move. Rigid obedience preserved paralysis. Initiative shattered it. A single act of motion turned the fate of Europe. For most of us, life unfolds in countless possibilities. We are not the embodiment of nations. We are not bound to the turning of epochs. But for certain individuals, at certain moments, history narrows. Their personal will becomes inseparable from the movement of their age. They do not merely act, they become the expression of their time. The stars do not dictate your daily life, but history moves in cycles. And sometimes in a single afternoon, those cycles converge. Waterloo was not merely a battle, it was an hour in which a man, an empire, and a moment in time met their limit. On the screen, you'll see the star chart I created for June 18th, 1815, the day of the Battle of Waterloo. Take a moment to study the planetary layout for yourself. If you enjoy exploring history through a deeper lens where ideas, events, and cosmic patterns intersect, subscribe and join me in the next lecture as we examine another turning point in time. Because history does not move randomly, it moves in hours.